Hi, I'm Dr. Gemma, and welcome back to Cognitive, the Knitting Psychology podcast. Cheerfully and somewhat irregularly in business since 2008. Segments today may include what's on my hooks, needles, and spindles, a strategy, something I really like, put a lid on it, oh shoot, and blather. So sit back, put your feet up, pick up your knitting, crocheting, spinning, weaving, or dyeing, or any other yarny thing you're doing, and get ready to enjoy. Well, hello. It's Dr. Gemma, and I am here welcoming you to episode 110 of Cognitive. And let me tell you, it's Romjul at last. Talk about sliding into the finish line on your hands and knees at all sorts of weird angles, being sick everywhere and feeling like you just about died to get here. It's one of those vacations. I'm so happy to talk to you. It is, let's see what it is Tuesday, December 27th, 2022 at 1:10 in the afternoon. And it is simply a joy to talk to you. I am beginning to regain consciousness after, let me think now, well, really 2 days of vacation and then some odd hours in between. And I'll get to all that in the blather. Things are great here. As you can probably hear, I'm not at my peak yet, but at least now I'm just resting and not chatting all day with patients and not worrying. And here we go. Let's do it. So I love your comments. This was a very comment-heavy week, in fact, and I'm going to try to get to all of them because there's some really excellent, substantive ones. Please leave your comments either on the blog at cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com or at our group on Ravelry. Speaking of which, I need to go over there and start a Romjul knit-along thread, which makes me excited to say, but I will come back to that. So much good stuff this week. Romjul is a beautiful time. Let's see what else I need to tell you. Well, again, I'm getting all sorts of robot attempts on my social media, so you can't follow me there, and I'm really sorry. If you're not already on there, it's going to be pretty hard for you to get on there. This annoys the heck out of me, but I've already been fooled by phony imitation accounts of people I know. Can you believe this? But you can be in on all the action at cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com and on our Ravelry group, I promise you. In the warm thanks department, lots of them. First of all, thanks for all the comments on the last few episodes. There have been quite a few. I'm going to try and get to them as I say. Also, I apologize for the sniffing and huffing and snorting in the background. I will try to edit out as much of that as I can. First off, yay, Chris and Beautiful Christina have officially joined the Romjul knit-along that I know of. If you've joined and you're not hearing your name here, please let me know in one of the aforementioned places. But Chris and Beautiful Christina have joined the knit-along. It's very, very exciting. And as I have said, I'm going to add a cow thread to the Ravelry group. Meanwhile, our own well-loved Karen RS75 is looking at the Alino shawl by, let me think, Lenka Komaro. I made it years ago, and I'm going to make more of them. I have all the stuff set aside because I love it. But Karen is pointing out, I'm not sure how consciously, the idea that if you have fingering weight scraps, this is a great way to use it. The original Alina I made that its designer really liked, I'm proud to say, she saw it at Stitches West years ago. I used a bunch of minis from a yarn club over at, I can't remember if it was the Unique Sheep, but anyway, I was in their yarn club, and then I bought extra to finish it. It seems to me it's like 700 to 800 yards to really do it right. And that's a great way to do a fade, which is exactly what I did before our own Dre Renee Knits called it that. But I did a fade with their different colorways, and it came out spectacular. So Karen's looking at that. So yeah, that's part of the Romjul knit along. Sure, you want to do a shawl, do a shawl. I have all these repetitive rules for the knit along, which I'll get to in a minute. But I've realized telling you should knit a Romjul sweater, well, that's what I want to knit at this time of year out of my scraps. But you should feel free to knit what you want, really. I just love the idea of us all knitting our way through this peaceful week of the year. And then meanwhile, Twinset Ellen, very, very loved over the years. Twinset is doing her Romjul thing too, she tells us. So yay, we've got a lot of Romjul knitters out there. Meanwhile, Sustainable Living, all one word, no G on the end. She has been doing the donations to homeless, I believe, I'm checking if she said domestic violence or homeless shelter, but she's doing the donations. So she is with us spiritually. And was it Beautiful Christina who said she was donating to a domestic violence shelter? Thank you. Really, so am I. Really, so am I. I have done domestic violence as a paraprofessional. I did it. That's how I became a professional, actually, was being a DV overnight crisis phone worker. And that changed my whole life. So anybody doing DV, you are with me spiritually. It's very near and dear to my soul. In those days, I was a Shakespeare professor, and I was doing what I thought of as feminist criticism. And it dawned on me that it's lovely to be a literature professor teaching feminism in Shakespeare's era. But the reality is, there are real women and children out there suffering right now in the hands of violence and legal issues. And you got to put your money where your mouth is. And so I stayed a professor, but started doing the paraprofessional work and learned many painful truths from doing it. One of them was that I really wanted to do it with the rest of my life. And so I'm now a mental health professional. That's what changed my life, in other words. Meanwhile, knit one, pug two. I said this on the brief message I sent earlier, but I am really sorry. Apparently, if you hang out with me too much online, you start getting picked up by the programs on social media as someone who's interested in ASL. So Knit One Pug 2 is apparently getting ASL resources thrown at her voluntarily by her online providers. If that's happening to you, well, never hurts to learn ASL, but yeah. I'd like to thank everybody who has sent good wishes in response to my ongoing illness. We are here in week 4. However, I did finally break down and go to an urgent care, as I think I've mentioned previously. And doctor, I could care less, said, I don't know, it could be anything, and gave me antibiotics and this amazing cough syrup, which I'll get to later. But I don't know if I'm getting better, but I'm on day 5 of the antibiotics. Can't be getting worse, put it that way. And believe it or not, this is not COVID. What is it? We suspect it's RSV. The doctor couldn't be bothered, but we suspect it's RSV. In the meantime, thanks to DC Elaine Knits, who points out that you can get another free 4 COVID test from the government. I had thought that program was gone. So thank you, DC Elaine Knits, for letting us know about that. The link is in the show notes. Please update your vaccines. If you can, if you're in California, you can get an electronic COVID card that you can carry in your Apple Wallet that shows your history. Please get everybody you know their shots. And this goes, forget all the shots that you can get right now because it's ugly out there. Seriously, I go out one day without a mask and listen to what happened to me. Alrighty. What's on my hooks and needles? Well, I haven't finished anything. Who cares? But at last, in progress, my Romjul 22 sweater. You can see a lovely picture of all the pile of blue scraps I've been accumulating. They're not all the same weight. There will be doubling of yarns and yarns held together. There will also be non-blues in this, I suspect, because I'm looking at doing a bunch of Fair Isle motifs when I get past the join for the neckline. I am doing a brick as the base pattern, and that means
that there are short rows on the back that you do side to side, and then you join, and then you start doing the whole yoke in the round. When I get to that place, I hope to start experimenting with Fair Isle patterns. But before I do that, I have picked out enough of a nice solid blue that it looks like I've got enough of it for the wrists, for the bottom hem, and for the top neckline. And so I'm working in that, and I will get that to the join. I will make the join. Then I will stop and I will go back and I will put on the collar, because I want to use that blue up and see how much of it I have left for the lower arms, most notably the ribbing at the wrists and potentially the ribbing at the hips. So when I do this kind of sweater, a part of the planning is I like the top and the bottom and the wrists to look reasonably alike. Now, as I say this, I'm wearing the Feral Easter Egg, which was kind of the same type of sweater but made around Easter time, hint the name. And I can see I went for similar colors, but not the same colors, because I didn't have enough of the same colors in my reds. The other thing you should be aware of when you're doing this kind of scrap sweater is not all the yarns will be the same thicknesses or weights. And so you're going to fool around with doubling them. There are even times where using hand spun, it turned into a bulky yarn and I just stayed on the size 9 needles and knitted it. So I have unevennesses in texture in the bodies of all my Romjul scrap sweaters. Now, at this point, all my Romjul scrap sweaters, what am I talking about? I have 3 sweaters that I have made from basically either totally my hand spun, 2 of them, the Feral Easter Egg and the Mad Skills Mammoth, and then a mix, which is the Romjul from last year, the Romjul 2021, which is the greens and blues, if you remember it. At this point, I'm being sloppy, but anything I'm making from my scraps, in other words, an unintentional pairing of yarns scooped out of my stash with the goal of using up stash, I'm calling that a Romjul sweater. Sure, I could be accurate and call it a scraps sweater, but am I? No, I'm just lazy. So when you hear me saying Romjul sweater, I'm really talking about sweaters that I made from stuff I dug out of my stash and said, I want to use this up. I'd like to point out there are many other ways to use this type of yarn. Number 1, there's knitting hats, preemie hats, hats for adults and children in shelters. There's knitting teddy bears for Mother Bear. There's a million ways to use up this type of scrap. So you should not feel obligated. I reached a point where I felt like I was knitting in this weirdly wasteful way, that I was making one sweater at a time out of exclusive, beautiful yarns, and then just throwing things into a scrap heap. And what happened was now probably about, I'd say somewhere in like the spring of 21, I looked in my stash and I felt overwhelmed by that. I felt like I have so much scrap stuff that I'm just letting accumulate that it's kind of blocking my view of my stash, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. And there is no question I could have taken all that scrap stuff and just started making all sorts of hats and selling them on eBay or giving them to shelters. Yes, there is no doubt of all that. That's part of the reason in the Romjul rules for this knit-along, I want you to take your scraps and make a few things for a shelter and give it to them. Okay, but again, there was a part of me, and I cannot think of her name. She's a very famous crochet designer. I want to say Miriam Wood, where she uses scraps and just assembles these insanely beautiful crochet sweaters and things, and just says, why are we not doing this? Why do we not realize the beauty of all this stuff, and also the beauty of randomness, that you get a sort of couture when you just design freehand. So Myra Wood? Is it Myra Wood? Boy, it's been a long time. She used to knit with us too down at Stitch Cafe, now the Altered Stitch. At any rate, I want to salute that logic, that I feel like there is an aspect of creativity that is going unloved. And that does not mean that you shouldn't knit for charity. I'm not saying don't make mother bears. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying every so often I need to sweep my stash out and look at my scraps in the sort of patterns by color or weight that they form, and then use them creatively for something for myself. So that's the Romjul logic. And this resting time of the year seems like such a good time to do that. I'd also encourage you, when you're looking at this kind of project, to say, do I want to do that? Or do I have enough to do that? If I don't, should I just return it all to a special bag in the stash? Or should I just look at it and do the obvious, that here is my source for making one charity project every time I finish a project for myself? There are a lot of ways to do this. But what I do want you to do is use up your scraps. Don't just have this huge heap of scraps accumulating in your stash. And it does blow my mind that I have that. Now, these were not all intentional sweaters, but as I look at it, I can see my first big crocheted sweater, the scraps from that, that's the retro, and I can see hand spun, and I can see actually scraps from my 21 Romjul sweater. So I have maundered on too long about this, but I hope you're getting the idea. But please, I'm going to go over to Ravelry and start a thread over there. Please report your plans and show your pictures over there, or feel free to add a comment to the notes on the blog to show us how you're doing. Show us your progress on your Romjul sweater. A reminder of the really repetitive and kind of out of control rules for this knit along. First of all, I hope your project has been started by now. I cast on December 25th. So, do as you will. I was planning the sweater several weeks before. So at any rate, I hope everybody has started a project. Next, rule 2. Donate some of your old woolens to a shelter, or donate some wearables that you're going to make from the yarns left over from this project. So an inherent part of this is to donate some woolens to a shelter. Why do I say that? Because I have seen people really trying to get rid of their extra woolies that they've made and don't really want to wear. Hats and socks and scarves, and you certainly can open an Etsy store and do it that way. But I would urge you to look through the things that you've made and say, am I wearing these? And if you're not, to just sweep them into a box and take them over to a shelter. A domestic violence shelter or a homeless shelter works great. Back in the day when I had my brick and mortar office up in Palmdale, I was right next door to a drug program, and the people in the program were impoverished as a rule. So I just took my woolies that one year and hung them on the trees in front of that program. It was delightful to hide in my office and listen to the people in the program discover them and figure out they could just take them. And then I could hear them trying them all on and laughing and enjoying them. And I went out an hour later and the trees were bare. There had been like 30 things out there. So it's a wonderful feeling. Please just take the woolies that you knitted and you're not loving enough. There is no problem. They're secondhand clothes. They're still better made than some fast fashion you're going to buy over at the mall today, So please, rule number 2, donate some of those woolens that you've made and aren't loving enough, or that the kids have outgrown or whatever. Rule number 3, make any sweater. There's no one pattern is what I want you to get here. Make anything you want from your leftovers. Rule number 4, drink good tea and eat good food. It is Romjul. You're supposed to be relaxing, and there's nothing like fine tea, I have discovered, for this. Rule number 5, you should probably try to finish your sweater or your project early in the new year. There's no real deadline on this. I would think it would be nice to have it finished by March 31st. Why do I even care? Well, you don't want these projects to become one of those whips that hangs around for the next 5 years. The goal of the Romjul is to do this very intense project and get it off the needles using up your scraps. Because frankly, every time I wear that kind of project, I am reminded of how competent I am, and that even my scraps have enormous value, and that I'm so creative I can make something wonderful out of them. The Romjul projects are amazing for confidence building. Rule number 6, spend some time with the people you love. It's Romjul. You're supposed to get together with people. And here we are in the dark time of the year, and as the light begins to grow again, we want to be with the people we love. Rule number 7. I don't care if you're not making a sweater, make a shawl. I don't care if you're crocheting. I don't care if you're felting. I don't care what you're doing. If you're weaving, those are all good things to do. But make some wearable, I hope. No, if you're making a tablecloth or a blanket, go you. It doesn't matter. This is Romjul. You're just using up the scraps. Rule number 8, deck your halls. Well, I probably at this point I should say, begin to take down the decking a little bit. It's not a bad idea during Romjul to spend your days doing something minor like take 5 ornaments off the tree every day. So in other words, you're supposed to be resting. Don't make a huge thing out of undecorating or decorating. But what I would say instead is just nice and slow. Last year, our tree was at risk of staying up until June, and I discovered that the easiest way to get the tree down was to take 5 ornaments a day off it. Believe it or not, in a week, that's 35 ornaments, and you're beginning to see the difference. And also, that kind of compels everybody else in my household to go, Mom, are you taking the tree down? And to help out a little bit here and there. Rule number 9, give a $5 minimum to the homeless, or I'm going to say a domestic violence shelter, because it can be pretty much the same thing. But do give some cash donation. Also, by the way, I have to say, if you're walking down the street and homeless Bob is lying there on the curb in the cold, begging money, give him $5. I don't care. Rule number 10. This feels a little dated now, but hey, what is this, the 3rd day of Christmas? Fa la 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 la. Okay, rolling right along. Oh, I had a wonderful victory yesterday. And I'm going to really thank Jasmine Knitmore for this, although she's completely unconscious that she even participated. Part of my Romjul projects involved ripping out the brick for Twin Face. That has been sitting, sadly, in a big project bag. One of our wonderful Tally's project bags, in fact, on my floor for 6 months. And it's depressed the hell out of me looking at it. Because literally I was finishing the first sleeve. I was so far along on it. And it's in the beautiful Malabrigo Rios Cereza yarn that I just love. Oh, every time I looked at it, I got depressed. So on, I think it was Christmas Eve. Was it Christmas Eve? I can't remember if it was Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. Must have been Christmas Day, actually. While looking at the ceiling, I managed to rip out the sleeve. And I told myself then, if I can rip out 1 skein of yarn every day from this sweater during Romjul, by the end of Romjul, I'll have ripped it out. So that was hard to do, and I felt truly blue about it. So yesterday, the 26th, I sat down and I looked at it. There was the body with the sleeves separated and all that. And I said, oh, this is heartrending. And I thought, all right, look, just go for the ribbing. See if you can get 1 ball yarn out of this. So, I snipped it. I couldn't find the ends. Well, I found the end, but I couldn't get it out. So I just snipped it. No big deal. And I started ripping. And of course, first thing, this wave of painful memories about Twin Face and her unsolvable problems and all that. And I was feeling very sad because it was really meant to go for her. And I thought, I've been through all this. Should I finish it and send it to her? And thought, no. There's a whole lot of reasons I'm not going to go into that won't work. I can promise you. And I thought I could finish it and give it to a shelter, except she's a really weird size. And I thought, no, I should just reclaim the yarn. So I'd gone through all that all over again. So I start ripping out the ribbing. And of course, I'd done such care in the knitting. I was alternating rows. In the midst of this, Jasmine Knitmore starts texting me about my latest episode. And so I started texting back. So with one hand, I'm texting Jasmine, and with the other, I'm ripping out. And so I'm distracted, and I'm depressed, and everything else. Jasmine, I don't know what that conversation sounded like or read like to you, but I have to tell you how grateful I am for it. Because I ripped out the whole damn thing while I was talking to you. And suddenly I'm sitting there, and I've got this bag of cheery red yarns, all wound into balls, sitting in my feet, and just looking innocuous. And it didn't scream, I am a failed sweater for Twin Face, and here are all your unhappy memories of your dysfunctional family. It just said, look at me. I'm cheerful red yarn. You know, you could use some of me in your current Romjul sweater for emphasis in your Fair Isle rose, and it would look just perfect because I am the right color value for that. I don't know how to thank you for that, Jasmine, but the Twin Face brick no longer exists. I removed it from my Ravelry page, and I am letting go of it. Goodbye, goodbye. Now, the thought of what do you feel like when you simply have this almost finished sweater and you give up on it? I'm going to hear Gigi Knitmore's voice, which is, if you didn't like it when you were knitting it, you're not going to like it more when you finish it. In other words, part of the temptation to push through and finish that would have just been a temptation to continue suffering until I finished it, and then to continue suffering every time I looked at it on my Ravelry projects page, yada, yada, yada. You know what I have now? At my feet, I've got this bag of cheerful red yarn saying, make me, make me. And it's making me so happy to look at this bag. So without knowing it, I owe this one to the Knitmores. And I also am happy because you think, how could you knit that much sweater and just say goodbye to it and you don't get something useful out of it? This offends my Amish heart, I have to tell you. But the answer is surprisingly easily, because I'm letting go of a lot of failures there and instead embracing that me and the yarn have places to go and things to do together, and the yarn has a lot more happiness to give me. I was happy knitting that sweater, and I am happy to have it unraveled, and I will be happy to knit it again. Thanks, Knitmores. That was really kind of useful. Now here I am in Romjul. Have I touched the lane splitter? Nope. The don't know yet, though. Ripping right along. Let me think. It's row 5 in the pattern. It's row 6 of the rows I am assembling. Row 6 has all its blocks joined together. And I am an inch away from finishing the join between row 4 in the body. I am weaving the ends in as I go. So I believe I just have a few ends to weave in. And that I will have the first 4 rows assembled and completely joined together. In other words, that's right, I've got the bottom quarter of the blanket. Actually, is it a quarter? It's more like about 20%. And row 5 is now completely seamed together, so it will be clipped on, I hope sometime today, and I will start seaming that big long seam. When I have those 5 rows done, I'm going to take it and lay it out on the living room floor, hopefully tomorrow or the next day. And I'm going to pull all the other colors out and actually paint the quilt. I'm going to actually take all the blocks apart and, lay them out the way I want them laid out and try painting the image I've been seeing in my head. Have I finished the individual blocks? I'm not sure. I did not crochet any for the last few days. I think in terms of the calendar, I think I didn't crochet any yesterday, the 26th, or the 25th. I'm not absolutely sure of that, but I believe I have all the blocks I need. And so I think it might be time to stop and do the layout and just decide. I've got 4 options on my desk, arguably 5, that I could do a few more blocks from if I need to. But I don't know which of these colors would be the best choice, and rather than guess blindly, I just decided the time has come to do the major layout. It is really a happy thing to say that 5 out of 19 rows are already laid out, completely seamed, and reaching the point of being completely joined into the bottom of the blanket, because it's not easy to lay out 361 tiny squares on your floor and not have disaster strike. So roughly a quarter of those are already assembled and seamed, so into one big solid piece. So that should make the laying out a lot more easy and a lot less accident prone. I'm really just waiting for that halcyon moment when the boys are not at home, which is not easy because we're all sick right now and we're all pretty much staying home and resting. But the don't know yet is just racing along, and this is something I never saw happening. And it just is wonderful. It is not perfect. There are bumps and uneven spots and everything else in the seaming. However, I have to tell you that this is something that surprises me with its ease. And also, it's kind of very self-encouraging. It's not a hard thing to do. You'd think with these hundreds of blocks, this would be much more challenging than it is. Additionally, seaming, I've got a pretty good method going for my mattress stitching. And the seaming sometimes looks uneven, and then surprisingly, I'll look at it the next day and it will have evened out. The tension is relaxing as it goes. Laying it on the bed and letting its weight do some of the blocking has been extremely successful. So this is a surprisingly successful experiment I'm running over here. I think my nightmare is to have hundreds of blocks sitting in bags in my house that never get used. This has been a terrific experiment, and I do recommend it. Again, I feel like it's Myra Wood. I feel like I'm using my scraps, and I'm finding out how exciting it is to do that, and how much creative fun it is to experiment and take risks with it. In the meantime, the Pennsylvania Dutch embroidery I haven't touched because I'm doing my hand sewing on the Don't Know Yet. So I'm not feeling the need to hand sew right now. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be doing any embroidery here in Romjul. It would be nice to finish the Pennsylvania Dutch embroidery. It's not that far from finished. On the other hand, that might be a wonderful palette cleanser after the Don't Know Yet, a much more massive project, is finished. The Wrapped in Tiny Chains, I'm starting to get hungry for it because I'm not crocheting right now. So that's good. I'm suddenly looking at its bag and going, The Lady Eleanor, I got interrupted on that. I got my new needles and I started on that, and then I got sucked away by the Romjul sweater. So I'm not working on the Lady Eleanor because if I'm going to knit right now, it's Romjul. I want to knit on my Romjul sweater. Right now, the Romjul sweater, I'm just driving towards, as I've said, reaching the join of the short rows into the knitting in the round section. So right now, no love to the Lady Eleanor, at least not in the last couple days. I wanted to thank Creative Lady 1. Why Creative Lady 1? I can't think. Was that who pointed me towards Alpaca Direct? At any rate, yes, Alpaca Direct has ChowGoo needles. And thank you, Creative Lady 1. I may have thanked you in the last episode. At any rate, thank you again. I've added Alpaca Direct to my list of favorite resources because they really are quite good. Dizzy Blondes. Because I am raspy, I am not spinning. However, I do continue to drop spindle one fuzzball of Minerva fur every day. One per day. We're getting a respectable amount of Minerva over there accumulating on the drop spindle. The new Nano is waiting to be unboxed, but I haven't gotten there yet. On the strategies. Well, I've been doing holiday strategies, and here we are in the cleanup period in Romjul. Now, you don't have to clean up. It depends on how you celebrate. Americans have this habit of going, okay, Christmas, now it's Boxing Day, Christmas is over, get rid of it. Whereas Europeans tend to keep everything around and celebrate Romjul and start considering the cleanup around January 1st or January 6th. I know if you're in Scotland, you're still waiting for Hogmanay, New Year's Eve, where everybody gets destroyed. The quietest day on the planet is New Year's Day in Edinburgh, Scotland. I'm serious. I've been there for this several times. You could walk naked down the main drags. Nobody would even be out there to see you because Hogmanay, well, it's one heck of a blowout. So at any rate, one of the holiday strategies I would say is try to think about mindful undecorating. So don't push yourself, don't make yourself crazy, don't undo all the joy of the season by arguing and sniping about getting everything taken apart. Easy does it. Now that everybody is home for a week and the kids are home from school, what you really need to be thinking about are what are the day-to-day activities, because everybody's underfoot with each other. One really nice way to do this is to say, we're going to have a dedicated time every morning to the cleanup. I would tell you right now, it depends on how many people you're wrangling, how much time you want to do. It also depends on their ages and their ability to take risk. Like, do you want the 4-year-old taking apart glass ornaments or taking down electric lights? Probably not. However, I would say, since you have all the kids home and you have this cleanup crew, what you could say is, we're going to have dedicated cleanup time. And dedicated cleanup time, for example, could be something brief, depending on the ages of your kids, maybe 9 to 9:30 or 10 to 10:30 every morning. And dedicated cleanup time ends with a whistle and then the hot chocolate. Okay, so in other words, you want to build a reward into this. So you say, okay, we've all had fun and we love our decorations. By the way, you could do this at a family meeting, discuss how this will happen. And you say, now, every day we have dedicated cleanup time. So at 9:30, at 10 a.m., everybody's sleeping on me, have breakfast. Okay, at 10 a.m., one person's going to take 5 ornaments off the tree. Maybe 2 people can do that, and they will have the ornament boxes ready to put them in. Okay, so they're going to take a little bit off the tree. Someone else is going to make sure the trash is out. Someone else is going to make sure the dishes from this morning are done, because we have to maintain our day-to-day as we go forward. And there's a lot more of us home to trip on each other. Someone else is going to make sure the beds are made. Someone else could make sure the rooms are picked up. Any combination of the above. Someone could go outside and take down just one string of lights. Don't go crazy. Don't overdo it. Maybe you're only doing this for 10 or 15 minutes. Maybe you're doing it for half an hour. But don't overdo it. Don't make it burdensome. And at the end of it, you have the mess, cleanup time is over whistle, and you have the hot cocoa reward. Everybody has hot cocoa. In other words, we have a sit-down, calm time. Maybe you can have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. But that's it. This can be a holiday activity for everybody. Just a really quick cleanup. Well, what are you really doing? First of all, you're including a reward. People who work hard get rewards, right? That's why I get a paycheck. That makes sense. Okay, so you're giving your kids an adult value that every day I work for a reward. And work isn't meant to be slaving. It's not meant to be your duty to the family or anything else. Sure, you can talk about that. That's another thing you can achieve, is talk about this is a part of being in a family. This is what we owe our family. But that doesn't mean it's a punishment. We still have rewards with it. We could have our cup of tea together in the living room after everybody has done their duty. We can go around the circle and have everybody say what they did in the last few minutes to help the cleanup. Okay, so you're teaching people to do an adult value, do a task for a reward. Additionally, happy people reward themselves frequently. Depressed people never reward themselves. So you're teaching your family an important skill. Do a little task, get a little reward. Do a little task, get a little reward. Next thing is you're talking about being proactive. We don't just trash the house and then lose a whole day in cleanup. Instead, we're proactive. So we get up every day and someone's going to do the breakfast dishes because we are proactive. We maintain every day. We don't just wait till there's disaster and then do mass cleanup and lose a whole day or lose a huge amount of time. Okay, so we're teaching proactivity. We're teaching maintenance strategies. How does a group together maintain its space? We're also teaching a healthy habit. Do a little work, get a little reward. Finally, we're showing group gratification. When you get the whole group together and you go around the group and you say, what did you do to help today in the family cleanup? You get everybody to say what they did. People feel proud of themselves. That's going to motivate them to do more. Okay, so while you're doing the holidays and everybody's at home and you're planning activities, keep everybody out from underfoot and try to minimize the mess. Remember, there is productive activity work. You can help people to learn how to cooperate as a group, how to do a family meeting, how to be proactive, how to be self-rewarding, how to maintain their space. Okay? So one holiday strategy, use your activities to help in the cleanup, but don't make it burdensome, and show people appreciation and gratitude. Teach them about rewards. Okie dokie, the fluffy books I finished Deaf Again. That is a great book. I feel bad. It's been on there forever. It's very readable. It's very enjoyable. It's more that it was paper bound, and I was not having a schedule that allowed me to carry it around with me as much as I would have liked to. It's a very rewarding book, and it really brings forward the experience of deaf kids in contemporary American society, that when you're born deaf or when you're born with hearing loss, if you're not born into a deaf family, and sometimes even if you are, you're thrust in this world of an educational system that presents deafness as disadvantage, disability, and loss. And regardless of what you think the truth of all that is, it interferes with the education of the child, as the author, Mark Drolsbo, really emphasizes, really demonstrates. Okay, there are a lot of competing pressures on deaf kids when they're getting educated. Should they have to speak? This is called oralism. Should they have to get implants? Not always successful and can be really terrifying in some situations. Should they just go to a dedicated deaf school? There's a question of academic achievement in some of those schools, because they have to start with teaching all the kids language that they didn't get at home. There are a lot of issues, and I highly recommend, if you're interested in what difference is like, I highly recommend reading Deaf Again, because it resonates across all sorts of differences from the mainstream. There are questions of race, ethnicity, as well as ability and sensory ability. I don't know if ability is too strong a word there, because deaf people don't feel they're not able. Okay, but it is worth reading. If you say, I'm not interested in deaf culture, read it anyway. If you're interested in racism, sexism, ageism, seriously, racial and religious discrimination, read it. It's worth reading. I highly recommend it. I am in the middle of A Sinister Establishment by Lynn Messina in the Beatrice Hyde Clare series. A little too introspective on our heroine's part, but I am enjoying it deeply. I don't want to ruin it. It's just fun to read. It's a rewarding series. The last installment I thought was a little slow, but this one has been a lot of fun. Something I really like. Good heavens, I could go on and on. First of all, in my little interim episode that I did on Christmas Eve, I recommended a source on Instagram called Let's Do Diz, and I think I misspelled it. This is a guy who is giving recommendations for hacking and improving your iPhone. And the spelling is all one word. Let's, L-E-T-S-D-O, do, as in dog, D-O, D as in dog, Diz. Like, yeah, the thing in spinning. D as in dog, I-Z-Z, or Z-Z if you're American. Let's Do Diz, all one word. This guy has great hacks for your iPhone. If you're getting invaded by ASL resources because you listen to me, this is probably someone you might be interested in. In the meantime, for Christmas, I got a new rocking chair. Oh, Lord. These people did something I never thought of. On the bottom of the runners, they put just a tiny bit of fabric. What does it mean? It means I can drag my rocking chair across the hardwood floors without scratching them. I love this chair. It is sitting in the living room underneath my multi-armed lamp. It's meant to go in our master bedroom, but I haven't taken it back there yet because I'm enjoying having it in the living room. And just sitting in the living room next to our big dresser and sitting there with my tea on a handmade coaster on the dresser, on the hardwood dresser, and just drinking in the living room in the middle of the action while my son plays with his toys and experiments and builds his Legos and my husband putters in the kitchen. I love my rocking chair. I just love it. In the meantime, my son, in a moment of just insane inspiration, got me this giant fluffy pillow from Target. Giant. It goes from about my knees to the top of my head. And in width, it's my body wide. Fluffy. It does not compress. I don't know what's in that thing, but it's synthetic, and I've been sleeping on it, and I'm loving it. It's in my bed. It takes up a huge amount of my bed. It's a terrific in-bed pillow. It's a terrific support pillow. Meanwhile, my husband decided to give me this insanely wonderful Christmas stocking full of Lily's keto chocolate bars, mostly deep dark chocolate, one with sea salt, and also full of Plum Deluxe teas, which I had given him the link and totally forgot about. I had the eggnog oolong tea. I have to say, I have had some wonderful tea in my life. This thing is totally off the scale. What they did that's so brilliant was the eggnog is a cardamom and vanilla flavor. They did not overwhelm it with cinnamon. There is cinnamon in it, but it's not overwhelming. That's the first brilliant thing they did. It tastes like eggnog. Second, when they paired it with a black tea, they did not pair it with a strong black, which is usually what happens in these cases. They instead paired it with oolong, and oolong, you probably know, has a faintly floral taste and this echo in the back of your nose of flower. I can't believe somebody thought of this. This is simply the single best tea flavor I can imagine. I have loved many teas in my life, but this thing just sent me round the bend. It's teagasm, seriously. So something I really like, I have to tell you, Plum Deluxe Eggnog Oolong. It's been hard to even taste my other teas after this. I am so insanely in love with it. This is the tea I have been looking for. Doesn't take cream, needs only a touch of sweetener. It may not even need that much. Insanely good stuff. Okay, put a lid on it. The tea tastings continue. If you're interested, that is Gemma Tastes Tea is my Instagram for that. All one word. Spelled exactly the way you think. Gemma Tastes Tea. Also, Knit One Pug 2 points out that those flavorless tea bags that I was praising, the ones that are not paper, they are not biodegradable. Yes, thank you for saying that. I had said that, and then I thought, do I believe that? And said, why do I believe that? And it's because a tea maker who shall go without name referred to them as silk. They're not. They're not. I did a little digging. They're nylon. Yes, kids, I don't like the flavor of paper, but nylon for a tea sachet, that's not even going to be close to biodegradable. On top of it, okay, I'm putting nylon in heat, in hot water, and drinking it. You know, it's a petroleum product, right? Y'all know that? So, I believe it is. So, anyway, thank you, Knit One Pug 2, for your appropriate horror on that. Knit One Pug 2 says, I'd rather drink paper. No kidding there. But it's another recommendation for loose tea. So, you know, those silk sachets, I'm so revolted by this. I have to tell you, I'm snipping them open and pouring my tea into my metal tea strainers. I can't bear the thought of drinking nylon. It is so horrifying once I found that out. So yeah, Knit One Pug 2, you got me there. Good for you. Those are not biodegradable, and I don't want to fill landfills with these tiny little nylon bags. Yeesh. Meanwhile, Chris checks in to tell me that she has a brother who blends his own tea. Okay, look, sometimes you win in life, and sometimes, like, grand prize, man. He made her own unique tea. Wow. And the other great thing she told me that I just love is she is my Ceylon tea sister. She loves Ceylon tea, and she drinks it. Yeah. Ceylon tea, I have always loved without knowing what it was. When we were in Fiji, they had this tea they served every day at breakfast at the hotel. And fortunately, being who I am, I saved a tea bag. And I came home and I bought it and said, well, what is this? And thought, oh, it's Darjeeling. You know, no, it's not. Darjeeling is too harsh for me. I grant you, many people love it. I don't. I find Darjeeling harsh. It's Ceylon. And then apparently this week I found out that Ceylon is another name for what the Americans call orange pekoe. And Americans, we think we drink orange pekoe because we drink a lot of cheap garbage made from the worst reject parts of the orange pekoe. from what I can tell. I don't think I've ever had a good cup of tea from an American commercial native tea company, unless it's someone like Harney or Plum Deluxe, who are going back to basics and blending and investigating all the teas. American cheap tea tends to be garbage orange pekoe, and Americans drink it really light. Well, you would too if your tea was this low quality. But a solid Ceylon, brewed dark, is a wonderful thing. So, yes, Chris apparently knows this. Thank you, fellow Ceylon sister. On to the blather. So, Yellow Boca Flawed, how'd that go? I sat up on Christmas Eve finishing Deaf again. I didn't have chocolate, but I had hot tea, and it was a beautiful thing. So, I think this one's going to join the Christmas festivities for me. ASL. I am supposed to be readying myself for taking 102 in February. Right now I'm in Romjul. I'm just not. But I've been trying to add 5 words a day to my vocab. Not as easy as you think. One of the things I started doing was just trying to talk. Just trying to walk around, talk to myself in ASL. And saying, what words do I not have that I would normally use? So instead of resorting to, here are the kinds of things I learned to say or to ask in my 101 course, I just walked around the house talking to myself. Oh, look at the Christmas tree. Isn't that pretty? I wonder how we will take that down. Do we have enough boxes to store those ornaments in? Things like that. And just jotting down the words I didn't know. And I'm trying to make a spreadsheet and just add those words to it and then learn them. 5 a day. Pop date. Well, some unsettling news. It looks like Captain has lupus, as Eleanor did. This is what took our Eleanor away at an early age, at 9 years old. Captain is manifesting it much younger than her. Her nose is the wrong color. They're going to biopsy it. They're doing the blood test. It's kind of sad. But Captain is our girl. This is our 3/4 Newf, 1/4 Border Collie. And we don't know why this is happening to her. It's just an immune disorder. But we are keeping her indoors with us and working on it. So keep your fingers crossed. It's not a happy thing, but it's not immediately life-threatening either. It is treatable, and we shall just go forward as best we can. In the meantime, Christmas was wonderful, if strange. My son wanted a lot of archery stuff. He has shot archery with me when he was very young, and he didn't remember that when he was like 5 or 6. So he was surprised to find out I am an archer. We got him all the archery equipment for target shooting. His bow will come in February. So there is a picture of him trying on the gear. He's doing an absolutely horrendous draw pose because he needs to be trained. Fortunately, Archery Mom is on the job. I got through my last week of work on my hands and knees. I got very sick that week. We went to urgent care on Thursday. The doc really, I should have called it urgent careless. Doc didn't care. She was angry and grouchy and irritable. Just having a terrible day. Overwhelmed with a lot of patients. There were only 2 doctors on duty. Boy, was she in a bad mood. That's all I can say about that. But she did end up giving me cough medicine, not a codeine, but an antihistamine with cough suppressant in it. What I didn't realize was this stuff would make me outrageously high. So Friday morning, when I'm trying to talk to a patient, I realized suddenly that my head was floating above the floor. So I saw very few patients. I ended up taking an entire extra day of vacation and pushed through seeing very few patients last week. But I submitted all my paperwork, and I made it to Romjul. It wasn't beautiful. Meanwhile, as for the cough medication, so I took some Christmas morning, and I still wasn't sure if it was making me high. By 10 a.m. Christmas morning, I was higher than the star on the top of our tree. So basically, I took a 2-hour nap and started over. But we had a lovely Christmas. And I'm really happy because, as I said, my big gifts were the insanely wonderful Christmas stocking full of chocolate and really good tea, the insanely wonderful rocking chair. If you look at the picture of my son posing with his quiver and his bracer, you will see the rocking chair on the right by our dresser in the background. I love that rocking chair. I love sitting in that window with that light behind me and working on the Romjul and drinking tea. I love it. And also there was the giant fluffy pillow. So I had just a terrific, terrific Christmas. I could not be happier. Also, the annual restocking of the house is finished. We have soap, we have shampoo, we have all sorts of cleansers, we have candles, we have tea. I just feel like it's been a very complete time. I got the yarns I need to finish the projects I'm working on. It's just been super. Wonderful, wonderful Christmas for me. Everything I needed without a feeling of excess. Now I'm in the resting phase. My husband made this insanely wonderful Christmas feast out of the roast chicken. No loss there. In fact, it was kind of really easy because we didn't have to tear apart a turkey. Do we miss the leftovers? A little bit. We don't have the leftover volume we would expect to have with a turkey. However, that roast chicken feast was fantastic, and then we had steak last night for Boxing Day. It was just really very, very pleasant. So Christmas has come and gone, and we are ensconced firmly in Romjul. If you look in the pictures, you will see my stocking with teas and chocolates sticking out of it. You will also notice that that is a hand cross-stitch stocking I made for my husband and I when we were dating. I made us matching Christmas stockings, and we are using them 35 years later. It's part of the fun. In the meantime, you will see my son's efforts at a gingerbread house. He is not the best aim with the icing because they had you ice the thing while it was assembled. So he's kind of doing this standing up and sideways. So if it looks a little runny, well, in my house, we call that gravity. But anyway, yesterday we already had the horrendous calamity. He knocked it off the breakfast bar. So now, congratulations, you are looking at a house that has already been raised. But there is his gingerbread house. The hubs and the son both have the same illness I have. My hubs and I are very much the same. We're good all day, and then at night, we're choking and hacking all night. But we're pushing our way through it. I'm on day 5 of 10 days of antibiotic and doing okay. My Romjul break actually ends on January 3rd, as I believe does my son's. So we're just sitting around the house enjoying that. We are on for the Grand Canyon, as far as I know, June 5th through 9th, and Sunnybank more tentative, August 17th through 21st of 2023. Minerva gets the last word. You can see her looking out our window at the oncoming storm. We are about to have about 9 days of rain and storm here. It's a real blessing. It is really one of the nicest things that could have happened. My car is off getting fixed. It will come home, I believe, on the 30th. So this is a fabulous thing. I'm going to get my nice repaired car. And I have nowhere to go. I wouldn't want to be driving in this kind of weather anyway. And we are all home together enjoying our Romjul. Minerva also wants you to know that there are several good animal features, particularly cat features, on Netflix right now. One, I believe, is called Inside the Mind of a Cat. And the other one is about the senses of household pets. It's probably called The Secret World of Household Pets or something like that. But there are some really good animal features roaming around on Netflix. While you're on Netflix, Extraordinary Attorney Woo, The Queen's Gambit, and Wednesday. Not all are as good as each other. Queen's Gambit for me is the clear winner. Wednesday, there's some very good things. The thing I don't like about Wednesday is that if you saw the original Addams Family back in the 60s, they're goth before goth exists, okay? But they're happy. They're not morbid. They're not nasty. They just genuinely, with great zeal, enjoy their own special take on the world. I am a little disappointed that the Addams Family in the years since, partly because of the goth movement, has really gone in this direction of being kind of morbid and pro-depressive goth. That's the letdown for me. However, it is a lot of fun. Her roommate is perfect. That whole pairing is interesting and funny and clever, and it leads to a predictable but moving ending between the two roommates. It's good. Do I think it's one of the best things I've seen? Well, television kind of sucks, so yes. But I don't think it's in the same league as Queen's Gambit, for example, or Extraordinary Attorney Woo. It's not that original. It's not thought-provoking in that sense. It's not that interesting. I've really enjoyed Attorney Woo and Queen's Gambit because they are questioning a lot of things and very thought-provoking and stimulating for me. Okay, but enough of that madness. Minerva gets the last word, and the last word is stormy weather. And she's happy contributing to my current spinning project. So here we are in Romjul, heading forward. And I thank you, those of you who liked my short project where I recorded a video and then posted it and posted the audio here on the blog as well so you could hear it, and put the audio on Libsyn so you could hear it as part of the podcast. Thank you for that. I may try a lot more of that. I really enjoyed doing that, and it was a nice way to do an update. Okay, with all that in mind, please, everybody, take a lesson from me. Get your shots, wear your mask, wash your hands, socially distance, be careful out there. There are a lot of illnesses floating around. Please, everybody, stay safe. Take care of each other. Have a great Romjul resting up, and I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
So we have come to the end of another episode of Cognitive. Please do not use this podcast to diagnose yourself. If you think you are having a mental health problem, please contact a licensed mental health professional. Show notes for these episodes can be found at cognitivepodcast, all one word, .blogspot.com. Episodes can be found at iTunes under the name Cognitive Podcast, but also can be found posted next to the show notes on the Blogspot page. Thank you so much for listening. Everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.